Hey guys, welcome to Even Line with Cyrus Southall, and in this one I want to give an introduction to the tasks of scouting for intel and hunting. And mainly this is aimed at perhaps newer or less experienced players who haven't performed either of these roles much before, or maybe you have, but there's little details about it that you haven't really picked up on. So I'm hoping to share a bit of my own knowledge on this, and maybe you'll find it useful. I'm looking at it from a couple of different angles. First of all, using D-scan to hunt, and secondly using combat probes, and a little bit about just providing good intel in general. So the first thing I want to do is talk about shortcuts, and the shortcuts are all about making things faster. Speed is really important, and I use a number of shortcuts to achieve that. This is just how I do it. It's not necessarily the fastest or best way, but it works really well for me. So first of all, in the shortcuts tab, in the combat sub-tab, and the most important one is for directional scanning. I bind it to the F key, and this just allows me to D-scan really quickly without having to move my mouse. If you watch some of my videos, you'll see people constantly moving their pointer down to the D-scan button way down in the corner, and that's a couple of seconds slower. And if you're trying to D-scan a lot, especially if you're in a wormhole, you want to have this bound to a hotkey. And then similarly, when you're using combat probes, that's the refresh probe scan command. I've got that one bound to B, and it allows me to, while I'm dragging with my mouse, I can then slam the B key and scan very, very quickly. And then thirdly, when you're combat probing, you really want to be quick on how you change the radius of your probes. And you can change it by using the scroll wheel or by dragging with, I think, a double mouse click. I tend to find it a bit nicer if I use the Z and X keys, and that's the increase probe range and decrease probe range commands here. So bang, 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 up and down, I can change the radius, and I'll show you a little bit of that later on in the video. In the next section, I'm going to undock, and I'm going to run through some steps you might use to use D-scan hunting and probe scanning in order to find a target. Okay, in this first example, what I'm going to try to do is D-scan down a VNI that's in space, and a couple of ways to do that. The first way is to use the rangefinder, like so. So you can literally just mouse over and hit your D-scan hotkey and reduce the size. I'm going to try and find the one called Matsman, the Matmobile. So if I reduce the angle there, you can see that he's disappeared from the directional scanner. I'll increase it to the full range again, and he is back on scan. So he's between 10 and 14 AU. That's the basic trick you can use just by doing it on range. So I immediately know that he is over 10 AU away. The next question is, what angle is he at? And again, you can just mouse down, and it's 180 degrees. He's disappeared completely, so I know that he's facing away. He's in the exact opposite direction to the direction I'm currently heading in. Now you can manually move your camera around and rescan each time, but there's another way to do it, which is when you jump into the system, you tap on that guy, bring up the full D-scan, hit this little angle thing at the top here, and it will zero in on wherever your ship is, and I can then change the angle down, and that's the way it's facing right now. And then you hold down your D-scan hotkey. So in my case, I've bound it to the F key, and I click like so. And by doing that, it actually, you can see that it's jumping around, and immediately my D-scan is updating. So if I then decrease the angle again, 90 degrees, it's down again, 60 degrees, it's down again, and you can see I'm immediately zeroing in. And in this case, I've found these two ships, Nugget 1 and Nugget 2. They're not the ones I'm looking for. I have a suspicion that maybe he's over here, so again, I'm holding my D-scan key down and rescanning again, and it's okay, he's not there. What about this guy? Yeah, he's over there, so that's still 30 degree angle, so that's not enough. 15 degrees, so 15 degrees is he's actually disappeared, so he's over there somewhere. Okay, there he is. So in this case, I just clicked on the asteroid belts over there, and he is a 15-degree scan. What about the 5-degree scan? He's disappeared. So now if I pan the camera around, you can see that there are a number of anomalies just outside of the angle of that this is projecting. So he's probably going to be at one of these. There he is. So by again holding the D-scan key and clicking the intended target, it immediately updates my D-scan, and I've zoomed right in. Now I can adjust my range again. Before, we actually established that he was over 10 AU, like so. So if I increase and decrease the range like so, you can see that he's reappearing and disappearing. Now, if I wanted to, I can incrementally, just by mouse overing the number here and using the scroll wheel, I can decrease the size of the range in tiny increments, and there you can see that he is like, I think 12.5, yeah, 12.5 AU on a 5-degree scan, like that. So now in this case it took me a long time to find that because I was talking and trying to show you, but in reality, if you were hunting, you'd come in, you'd open up the D-scan window and the probe scanner window like so, and immediately start hammering away on your D-scan and adjusting the angle and the range, and you can find things very, very quickly if you do that. The key is to hold down your D-scan button when you're selecting a target anomaly, and you can zero in on stuff instantly that way. It also works in space, so if I close down this guy and if I just pick some random site like this one here, and in this case there's actually nothing to be found in these anomalies, but it's actually changing the angle of my D-scan every time I do that, and so you can do that without opening the whole overlay like this. So that's the end of this part. So the next part is, let's imagine that you were trying to hunt somebody and you wanted to actually scan them down with a set of combat probes. Maybe they're not at an anomaly, but they're at some point in dead space nearby, and you want to combat them down. And you can narrow down the search radius by using the D-scan in the way I just showed you, and position your probes more accurately. And in this case, I already know that the Vexor Navy issue is over here. He's at this anomaly, or near to it, and he was at a range of about 12.5 AU, I think, if I go back. Yeah, so he's 12.4 AU. So what you want to be able to do is drop the probes and reduce the radius of the probes so that it's very, very tight around the intended target, so that you can hit them on the first probe scan. So as I've already worked out that he's here, what I'm going to do is, if I tap B, so I've bound my D-scan, my probe scanning ability to my B key, and I'll use that for every time I want to refresh my probe scan. So I'm going to drop them here, I'm going to drag them over, I'm going to double click the target and use the square, and now I use my hotkeys to decrease the radius of my probes, which is Z in my case. I use Z and X, so Z to decrease, X to increase. So if you set them up with a hotkey like that, you can change the radius very, very quickly. And now I'll hit B and I'll scan. In the meantime, I'm going to tap 1 in the probe scanner window to remove all of the spatial anomalies, just so it only shows the Vexor Navy issue. There we go. So I got him on the first scan. Very quick and very easy. Okay, so the next thing that you want to try and do if you're using D-scan with combat scanning probes is you want to be able to drop your scanning probes outside of the D-scan radius of the target that you're hunting, ideally in advance. And by doing that, they won't know as quickly that they're being hunted. If they see the scan probes on the D-scan, they're immediately going to be alerted. So in this example, I know that there's a caracal which I'm pretending to hunt over here. I've already scanned it down before, you can see it in my probe scanner, but he's over here at planet 5 somewhere. And my ship, on the other hand, if you click this icon at the top, you can zero in on where your ship's currently located next to this gate, and it's well over the minimum, or rather the maximum distance of the D-scan, which is 14.3 AU, he's at 31 AU. So if I hit my hotkey for launching my probes, which in my case is the B key, and I'm going to just drop them over here. I can double click, I can hit the B key like so. Now what I'm going to do is warp in somewhere near planet 5. In this case I'm actually in a Svipple, so I'm not in a Cloaky Hunter, but the principle is the same. I'm going to warp in and I'm going to be hitting my D-scan, trying to find him. Meantime, my scan probes are way over here. If I D-scan again, my probes have now disappeared, they're outside the radius, and there's the Caracal, and I'm going to use D-scan hunting to find him. I've already zeroed in the fact that he's at 1 AU to where my ship currently is, and if I use the mouse wheel I can zero right in on where my current location is like that. Having done that, I can move the probes in, I can double click and get the correct angle, and you want to drop it on wherever your ship is or wherever you think the target is, and use your hotkey to reduce the radius. In my case I use the Z and X keys again, and then hit my combat scanning hotkey, and it's going to warp the probes across, and it's going to scan the guy down. There it goes, and I'll get him on the first hit, and there it is. I can then warp or fleet warp my fleet or my squad to the target. We can tackle him. In some situations you will know in advance before you get to a system what ship type you're actually hunting, but you may not know exactly where they are in the system. And one thing you can do there is, if you know in advance that it's a larger kind of ship, you don't need to mess around with reducing your scan probe radius, because the default radius of 4 AU will often be sufficient to get a hit on a larger ship. So in this example I'm pretending to hunt a Tornado, which is a fair, reasonably large ship, and I'm going to launch the probe scan window, going to pop my probes, I'm going to zero in on where my ship is because I know that he's within 4 AU of me, and I'm not going to change the radius at all, and I'm going to scan right away as quickly as I can. It's all about speed, and in this case, okay, I get a pretty good hit on that attack battlecruiser. Quick reduction of the radius and another scan, and I should have him. There we go. So in the case of a Tornado, it's not a massive ship. It took a couple of scans. If it was a battleship, I would probably get it on the first hit. If it was a carrier, then you definitely get it on the first hit if it was within the radius. One of the things that will happen when you're using probes is that sometimes you get a partial hit on a signature. So in this example, I've just hit B, I'm running my probes, and there's a ship nearby, but I don't have a good lock on it. And you can see here that I've actually got 2 signatures for 3 different targets here. And how do you know which one is the right one? So the easy solution is you just reduce the radius by 1 unit. In my case I hit my Z hotkey, and you ignore the ones that are inside of the bubble and you take the ones that are outside of it. So I'll move my cube over here and reduce it again. So I've actually just reduced the radius by 2. Hitting B again to scan once more, and this time I should get a clear hit on the target, and there it is. One of the things that can happen when you're using combat probes to scan someone down is that in many cases you'll actually land on them, drop out of warp, and they'll warp away just as you land because they were aligned to a celestial. Sometimes people will warp to the first celestial they can see and they panic warp, and if you're quick you can move your probes over the location where they warp to and hit your probing key again and catch them with your probes as they drop out of warp. And if you're quick you can warp again and you'll land on them, especially if you're in a fast warping ship. So in some cases though, what will happen is they will try and warp back to the location they came from. So the key thing to do is, whenever you do get a scan result, bookmark it and give it a number. And if you do that, you can track which ones you've recorded. So in this example, I'm simulating a case where they landed here at first and I gave it bookmark number 1. I was unable to tackle them. They warped off, but I probe scanned them over here at number 2. So as soon as I got a result on this one, I gave it number 2. I couldn't catch them on this one. They warped back in the same direction and I caught them here and I gave this number 1 1 and 2 2 and so on. So if you give them some kind of a sequence with numbers or letters, it helps you to kind of keep a track of what you're doing, and that way you can actually catch people. One thing I find very useful quite often, especially where there's a system with many stargates and you want to find them quickly or find where they are relative to one another, just mouse overing them will actually cause them to be highlighted in the probe map overlay, and that's extremely useful. Otherwise you end up kind of scrabbling around trying to find it, and this can save you some time. If your role in the fleet is simply to provide some intel, some info on the ships that are approaching, the best thing you can do is hit your D-scan, click in it, hold down shift and select a whole bunch of them, and Control C and then Control V to paste it into any of the public D-scanning tools like dscan.info, and then just copy the link that generates and give it to the FC in your fleet chat or your alliance comms. And although it's such a really basic thing, it's amazing how often people actually forget to do this, and it can lead to confusing intel on what's actually present. Okay, so imagine that you're being asked to hunt a hostile wormhole and you don't know what's inside yet, and you're going in to find out. So in this case it's a wormhole that I scanned down earlier today. I'm just going to jump into this guy, and I'm in a covert ops right now, but you could do this in any ship really. An interceptor would also be a good choice for this, because the enemies can have a hard time tackling you. So I've jumped through, I've bookmarked the return hole. That's the first thing you really want to do, and the first thing I'm going to do is D-scan. So I've got my F key bound to D-scan, and you can see that there's absolutely no Astra houses or Fortizars or anything like that within range, within 14 AU. However, if I pan around, I can immediately see the blue highlight. So I've immediately found that I think that's an Athanor over there, a moon mining building. If I pan it around, I might see some others. Okay, so I'm not seeing any others right now, but imagine for a second that maybe this was a Fortizar, a larger structure, and if it is, that's probably going to be the structure that the enemy is based out of and where all of their ships are. So I'm going to burn off, double click in space, cloak and micro warp drive away, so that if anyone's watching the hull in a cloaky ship, they don't get to see where I'm about to warp to. That's the main reason I would do that. And the first thing I want to check is who is in this citadel. So I'm going to right click you mouse over it and then you can right click, and that's how you can get to it without it even showing in your overview. So here we go, I'm warping across, it's 24 AU, and D-scanning as I go, just in case, and there we have it. It is actually an Astra house, and the first thing you want to do, you're landing at 100 so you're safe, and you're cloaked of course. You click it, and on the right hand side, just next to the range indicator, you've got this little box in the square brackets, and the 0 indicates that it's currently unoccupied. If you're in a truly hostile wormhole though, there's a good chance that this is going to say some positive number. So once you've done that, you immediately know where you stand. If this guy is full of hostiles, then it's going to be a risky venture. Maybe there's a fight that you're looking for. It depends what you're about to do. And if I pan back, I can see my return bookmark, and that's where I'm going to head next. Of course, guys, it goes without saying, if you're in a wormhole and you don't see anything on D-scan, or you don't see anything in the citadels, that doesn't mean the hole is empty. They could be cloaked watching you right there. So use caution. Another really crucial point about gathering intel on citadels and wormholes is that if they are within your D-scan range, and you want to go and check them out, you don't need to look for them on the horizon. You can just warp to them straight from the directional scanner window. There's a warp menu right here. Just use that and you're golden. The last little trick I want to talk about in this video is if you are scouting or hunting, often it involves chasing the enemy wherever they're warping to next. And if you're dropping out of warp and you're landing on the enemy, it can be quite tricky to actually turn your camera in the correct direction to find where they're warping. But there's a good little trick for that, and it's the tracking mode. So you can tell if you're in tracking mode by selecting anything. So in this case I'm just going to select this hauler here, and it just targets it. Well, it just focuses on it. If I select the Citadel, it just focuses on it. And you just hold down Shift and press C. So that drops you into focus mode or tracking mode, and if you then click on something, it will actually turn the camera directly to that thing. So this is super handy, because imagine for a second that this malediction over here was the enemy that I was chasing. I've just landed out of warp and I've enabled tracking mode. I click on him, and then moments later he warps off, and I actually want to see where he's going. So by doing that, you can see the camera will auto track him, and I could tell that he warps over here towards 3QE, and I can align and warp and then chase him. Okay guys, that's all I've got for now. I hope you found it useful. See you next time. Thank you.